Introduction. O man! You should be aware that there are certain phrases which are commonly used and imply unbelief. The believers also use them, but without realizing their implications. We shall explain 3 of the most important of them. The first. Causes create this. The second. It forms itself. It comes into existence and later ceases to exist. The third. It is natural. Nature necessitates and creates it. Indeed, since beings exist and this cannot be denied, and since each being comes into existence in a wise and artistic fashion, and since each is not outside time but is being continuously renewed, then, O falsifier of the truth, you are bound to say either that the causes in the world create beings, for example, this animal, that is to say, it comes into existence through the coming together of causes, or that it forms itself, or that its coming into existence is a requirement and necessary effect of nature, or that it is created through the power of one all-powerful and all-glorious. Since reason can find no way apart from these 4, if the first 3 are definitely proved to be impossible, invalid and absurd, the way of divine unity, which is the 4th way, will necessarily and self-evidently and without doubt or suspicion, be proved true. The first way. This to imagine that the formation and existence of things, creatures, occurs through the coming together of the causes in the universe. We shall mention only 3 of its numerous impossibilities. First impossibility. Imagine there is a pharmacy in which there are hundreds of jars and phials filled with quite different substances. A living potion and a living remedy are required from those medicaments. So we go to the pharmacy and see that they are to be found there in abundance, yet in great variety. We examine each of the potions and see that the ingredients have been taken in varying but precise amounts from each of the jars and phials, 1 ounce from this, 3 from that, 7 from the next, and so on. If 1 ounce too much or too little had been taken, the potion would not have been living and would not have displayed its special quality. Next, we study the living remedy. Again, the ingredients have been taken from the jars in a particular measure so that if even the most minute amount too much or too little had been taken, the remedy would have lost its special property. Now, although the jars number more than 50, the ingredients have been taken from each according to measures and amounts that are all different. Is it in any way possible or probable that the phials and jars should have been knocked over by a strange coincidence or sudden gust of wind and that only the precise, though different, amounts that had been taken from each of them should have been spilt, and then arranged themselves and come together to form the remedy? Is there anything more superstitious, impossible and absurd than this? If an ass could speak, it would say, I cannot accept this idea, and would gallop off. Similarly, each living being may be likened to the living potion in the comparison, and each plant to a living remedy. For they are composed of matter that has been taken in most precise measure from truly numerous and truly various substances. If these are attributed to causes and the elements and it is claimed, causes created these, it is unreasonable, impossible and absurd 100 times over, just as it was to claim that the potion in the pharmacy came into existence through the phials being knocked over, by accident. In short, the vital substances in this vast pharmacy of the universe, which are measured on the scales of divine determining and decree of the all-wise and pre-eternal One, can only come into existence through a boundless wisdom, infinite knowledge and all-encompassing will. The unfortunate person who declares that they are the work of blind, deaf and innumerable elements and causes and natures, which stream like floods, and the foolish, delirious person who claims that that wondrous remedy poured itself out when the files were knocked over and formed itself, are certainly unreasonable and nonsensical. Indeed, such denial and unbelief is a senseless absurdity. Second impossibility. If everything is not attributed to the all-powerful and all-glorious One, who is the single one of unity, but is attributed to causes, it necessitates that many of the elements and causes present in the universe intervene in the being of every animate creature. Whereas the different and mutually opposing and conflicting causes should come together of their own accord in complete order, with the finest balance and in perfect concord in the being of a tiny creature, like a fly, is such an obvious impossibility that anyone with even an iota of consciousness would say, "This is impossible, it cannot be." The tiny body of a fly is connected with most of the elements and causes in the universe, indeed, it is a summary of them. If it is not attributed to the pre-eternal and all-powerful One, it is necessary for those material causes to be themselves present in the immediate vicinity of the fly, rather, for them all to enter into its tiny body, and even for them to enter each of the cells of its eyes, which are minute samples of its body. For if a cause is of a material nature, it is necessary for it to be present in the immediate vicinity of, and inside, its effect. And this necessitates accepting that the constituents and elements of the universe are physically present inside that minute cell, a place too small even for the tip of its antenna, and that they work there in harmony like a master. A way such as this, then, shames even the most foolish of the sophists. Third impossibility. It is an established rule that, if a being has unity, it can only have issued from a single being, from one hand. Particularly if it displays a comprehensive life within a perfect order and sensitive balance, it demonstrates self-evidently that it did not issue from numerous hands, which are the cause of conflict and confusion, but that it issued from a single hand that is all-powerful and all-wise. Therefore, to attribute a well-ordered and well-balanced being which has unity such as that to the jumbled hands of innumerable, lifeless, ignorant, aggressive, unconscious, chaotic, blind and deaf natural causes, the blindness and deafness of which increase with their coming together and intermingling among the ways of numberless possibilities, is as unreasonable as accepting innumerable impossibilities all at once. If we leave this impossibility aside and assume that material causes have effects, these effects can only occur through direct contact and touch. However, the contact of natural causes is with the exteriors of living beings. And yet we see that the interiors of such beings, where the hands of material causes can neither reach nor touch, are 10 times more delicate, well-ordered and perfect as regards art than their exteriors. Therefore, although tiny animate creatures, on which the hands and organs of material causes can in no way be situated, indeed they cannot touch the creature's exteriors all at once even, are more strange and wonderful as regards their art and creation than the largest creatures, to attribute them to those lifeless, unknowing, crude, distant, vast, conflicting, deaf and blind causes can result only from a deafness and blindness compounded to the number of animate beings. The second way. This is expressed by the phrase, "it forms itself." It too involves many impossibilities and is absurd and impossible in many aspects. We shall explain 3 examples of these impossibilities. First impossibility. O you obstinate denier! Your egotism has made you so stupid that somehow you decide to accept 100 impossibilities all at once. For you yourself are a being and not some simple substance that is inanimate and unchanging. You are like an extremely well-ordered machine that is constantly being renewed and a wonderful palace that is undergoing continuous change. Particles are working unceasingly in your body. Your body has a connection and mutual relations with the universe, in particular with regard to sustenance and the perpetuation of the species, and the particles that work within it are careful not to spoil that relationship nor to break the connection. In this cautious manner they set about their work, as though taking the whole universe into account. Seeing your relationships within it, they take up their positions accordingly. And you benefit with your external and inner senses in accordance with the wonderful positions that they take. If you do not accept that the particles in your body are tiny officials in motion in accordance with the law of the pre-eternal and all-powerful One, or that they are an army, or the nibs of the pen of divine determining, with each particle as the nib of a pen, or that they are points inscribed by the pen of power with each particle being a point, then in every particle working in your eye there would have to be an eye such as could see every limb and part of your body as well as the entire universe, with which you are connected. In addition to this, you would have to ascribe to each particle an intelligence equivalent to that of 100 geniuses, sufficient to know and recognize all your past and your future, and your forebears and descendants, the origins of all the elements of your being, and the sources of all your sustenance. To attribute the knowledge and consciousness of 1,000 Platos to a single particle of one such as you who does not possess even a particle's worth of intelligence in matters of this kind is a crazy superstition 1,000 times over. Second impossibility. Your being resembles 1,000-domed wondrous palace in which the stones stand together in suspension and without support. Indeed, your being is 1,000 times more wonderful than such a palace, for the palace of your being is being renewed continuously in perfect order. Leaving aside your truly wonderful spirit, art and other subtle faculties, each member of your body resembles a single domed part of the palace. Like the stones of a dome, the particles stand together in perfect balance and order, demonstrating the eye and the tongue, for example, each to be a wondrous building, extraordinary work of art, and miracle of power. If these particles were not each officials dependent on the command of the master architect of the universe, then each particle would have to be both absolutely dominant over all the other particles in the body and absolutely subordinate to each of them, and both equal to each and, with regard to its dominant position, opposed, and both the origin and source of most of the attributes that pertain only to the necessarily existent one, and extremely restricted, and both in absolute form, and in the form of a perfectly ordered individual artifact that could only, through the mystery of unity, be the work of the single one of unity. Anyone with even a particle of consciousness would understand what an obvious impossibility this is, to attribute such an artifact to those particles. Third impossibility. If your being is not written by the pen of the pre-eternal and all-powerful One, who is the single one of unity, and is instead printed by nature and causes, there would have to be printing blocks in nature not only to the number of cells in your body, but to the number of their thousands of combinations, which are arranged in concentric circles. Because, for example, if this book which we hold in our hand is written, a single pen may write it relying on the knowledge of its writer. If, on the other hand, it is not written and is not attributed to its writer's pen, and if it is said that it exists of its own accord or it is ascribed to nature, then, as a printed book, it would be necessary for there to be a different iron pen of each letter so that it could be printed. In a printing press there have to be pieces of type to the number of letters in the alphabet so the letters in the book come into existence by means of them, pens to the number of those letters being necessary in place of a single pen. As may be seen, sometimes a whole page is written in a single large letter from among those letters with a small pen in fine script, in which case 1,000 pens would be necessary for one letter. Rather, if it took the form of your body, with all its components one within the other in concentric circles, there would have to be printing blocks in each circle, for each component, to the number of the combinations that they form. Now, see, if you claim this, which involves 100 impossibilities, to be possible, then again if they are not attributed to a single pen, for those well-ordered, artistic pieces of type, faultless printing blocks and iron pens to be made, further pens, printing blocks and letters to the same number as themselves would be necessary. And they too would have to have been made, and they too would have to have been well ordered and artistically fashioned. And so on. It would carry on in succession ad infinitum. There, you too understand. This way of thinking is such that it involves impossibilities and superstitions to the number of particles in your body. O denier of God! See this, and quit the way of misguidance. Flashes 233